Good afternoon. My name is Danette Roth, and I would like to discuss with you um, Calvin and his participation in an informal assessment that I administered. Um, it was utilized to identify Calvin's areas of needs for reading due to his current academic reading level. Um, he's reading, or his goal is to read 40 words per minute at a first grade level. At the beginning of the school year, he was reading 22.5 words per minute with 10.5 errors to an accuracy of 68%. Currently, in the middle of the third quarter, he's reading at the same level to an average of 16.75 words per minute with 10.25 errors to an accuracy of 62%. So his words per minute have declined as well as his accuracy has declined. I'm hoping the informal assessment will identify his reading errors and we can focus on ways to improve his reading fluency. I included a checklist to identify Calvin's problem areas in reading. The checklist included Calvin's responses when rhyming words, identifying initial sounds, identifying ending sounds, and blending. I told Calvin we were going to play some word games, and I told him the first game we were going to play would be identifying rhyming words. I asked him if he knew what rhyming words were, and he responded no. So I explained to him that rhyming words are words that end with the same sound. I gave him an example of cat and hat, enunciating the rhyming part of those two words. So, at and at. I asked him if he thought the endings sounded the same, and he said yes. Now, I'm not sure if he really understood they were rhyming words, or if he was just saying yes because he knew that was the answer I expected. I gave him 10 word combinations. 5 of them were rhyming, 5 of them were not rhyming. Some of them had the same beginning sounds. I intentionally did not put the same ending sounds, so I wouldn't put been and run um, with the two ending sounds because I didn't want him to get confused and think the N was a rhyming pair. Um, and on this particular assessment, he was able to identify 2 out of 5 words as rhyming, and he misidentified 2 sets of words as rhyming because they did begin with the same sound. He had a 50% accuracy on this assessment when he was identifying words that had the same rhyming sound. Next, I performed an informal assessment to see if he could recognize the beginning sounds of words. I explained to him that some words start with the same sound, and I gave him the examples of cat and car, and again I enunciated the sounds. So when I gave him the example, I said k, at, and k, r, and sometimes I would even enunciate it more by saying k, 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 cat, or k, 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 car, to get him to hear the same beginning sound. He said he did understand that those 2 words began with the letter C and the k sound. Again, I gave him 10 word combinations, and I did give some combinations where the endings were the same, but he did very well on this activity, and he was able to identify the beginning sounds of all the word combinations, so he did receive 100% on that assessment. Next, I administered an informal assessment to include the ending sounds, and I explained to him that it would be performed the same way, except this time we would be focusing on the ending sounds instead of the beginning sounds. And so I gave him the example of fun and pen, and I asked him if he could hear, or first I asked him if he could tell what letter it was, what sound it was that was at the ending of those words. And he stated that yes, he did, and he was able to identify that it was the N sound. Next, I gave him 10 word combinations, and on that particular assessment, he was able to identify 4 out of the 5 word combinations that had the same ending sound, but he did misidentify 2 of the word combinations. One of those combinations had the same beginning sound of k. So I'm wondering if he didn't just confuse that particular word combination, but he received an 80% on that assessment. Lastly, I administered an assessment to determine how well Calvin could blend words. I told him that I would say a word slowly to see if he could identify the word. Um, and I gave him the example of ig. He struggled with that word, so I gave him another example of at, and he was correctly able to respond to that word. I gave him 10 words that I sounded, and I just enunciated the blends k, and he was able to identify 3 sets of words correctly. However, he was unable to blend the last 7 words, which gave him a score of 30%. Um, I believe these assessments gave me a baseline on how to move forward with Calvin and his reading fluency. Um, the assessments confirm his current reading level. He's very good at his word lists. Um, so he's good at the rote learning, the identifying the words. However, when it comes to blending or reading new words or the phonics, he is unable to do that. So I'm hoping that this assessment has identified the area of need that he has when it comes to his reading. As we work together, I did discover that sometimes he will insert words or he'll guess based off of the beginning sound. So for example, the word door was presented to him, or he saw the word door on the paper, but instead of saying door, he said dog. And I think dog is a familiar term for him, and he saw the D and the O, and he just automatically replaced door with the word dog. So I'm hoping that by implementing the recommendations that I'm about to give you, that will give Calvin some strategies in order to sound out words and use his phonics to identify new words. And this kind of goes away from the rote learning, and he's able to use some of the skills that he currently has to figure out some new words in his reading. One of my recommendations is, let me find it here, foldables. Foldables are pieces of construction paper where you have them folded over, and you might have a word, or you could use a word wheel as has the same premise. And what you do is you have the ending sound when this is your rhyming words, so you have your ending sound like at, and you're able to replace the first letter to create a new word. So he might be given the word bat, and he can replace the first letter with a C to make cat, and replace it again with an F to make fat, an M, a P, an S, so on and so forth, where he can create all these new words where the ending stays the same, but the beginning changes, and he's able to do that just by replacing the first letter. Another activity to help him blending sounds would be blending cards. And blending cards are words written on index cards or like a half sheet of paper, and what they have on them are the letters of the word written out. And I would start with the simple words, the consonant, vowel, consonant, and then you have dots underneath, so he has a place to draw his finger. And so he puts his finger on the first dot. So for example, if you gave him the word cat, he could put his finger under the C, and he would say k, and he would jump to the A to say ah, and then he would jump to the T to say t, and he would go through that, and he would just blend it until he figured out the word was cat. And you just give him a variety of words with that simple consonant, vowel, consonant, and then he goes through that drill to identify those words. As he progresses through the words, you progress to give him more difficult words. So now it's consonant, vowel, consonant next, and even with the foldables, you could give him the same thing, and it would be like ATE, so it would be gate or bait. Well, I guess that's a bad example. Or there's even foldables where like you would have like the consonant, vowel, consonant, and then you'd put the silent E on the end, and you would show them how the word changes from mat to mate, and how that vowel changes when you add that silent E to the end. Another activity we could introduce to Corbin is where he creates his own blends or words. So, for example, you might give him a magnetic board with magnetic letters, and then he can create his own words, and then he does the same thing with his finger by putting his finger underneath the letter so he can say the sound. They had, instead of using a magnetic board, he could just use letters like that are written on an index card, and he can just replace the letters or manipulate the letters to create words. Calvin was very compliant during these activities. I think he enjoyed the activities. He liked the idea that he was playing games. At one point, it did get loud in the classroom, and he did ask if we could move. So I liked that he was able to advocate for himself. I think these assessments just they kind of confirm where he is at in reading, and hopefully this gives us areas that we can work on with him to improve his reading. Do you have any questions for me? Thank you.